Hi, my name is Roy Collin and welcome to the show. I've also got five podcasts: the Awakening podcast, exposing fraud and corruption, but with solutions; the Crypto podcast, on about all things blockchain, NFTs, crypto; the Meditation podcast, talking about all different types of meditation, but there's also meditations there from 1 minute to 2 hours. And the other one's the Learn Polish podcast. So if you're interested in learning Polish, you can do that. And the other one is Speaking with Roy Collin. And I just have guests from around the world talking about either public speaking or also about their book or just general life in general. And you'll find everything on bio.link/podcaster. I'm also a podcasting coach. And you see the QR code there, and it's also on my link as well. And if you're interested in actually going on some podcast shows, I'm helping people doing that. Or if you're interested in sponsorship, you can contact me. And I'd like to thank my sponsor, DanielPacker.com. He helps people with anxiety, stress, and addictions. He's got a 90% success rate, and you only pay if you're successful. So be sure to check him out, DanielPacker.com. I hope you enjoy this week's show. Welcome to the Meditation Podcast. You can find all our episodes on meditationpodcast.org. My guest today, originally from Florida, but now living in beautiful Portugal, is a seasoned emotional therapist and plant medicine facilitator with experience in emotional and trauma recovery, trained as a clinical nutritionist, and as we discussed previously, was previously into journalism, which is also interesting. Please welcome Becca Williams.
Hi, Roy. It's so nice to be here with you.
So, I've mentioned a few of the things, but I think it's probably nice to let the listeners know a little bit of your journey before we kind of delve into how you're helping people.
Sure. So I think in a nutshell, I'd just like to say I help those burdened by trauma and pain, and I teach them to process their emotions so that they can confidently handle life's unexpected turns, any personal or interpersonal situation. And this is very different than what's out there. It's revolutionary new. I learned it personally about 10 years ago, and I was, as you mentioned, in media at the time. I was a television producer, and for years I was, well, all my life essentially I was burdened with anxiety and depression, and I had an explosive anger, and a lot of sadness. And I came across this work. I did a lot of work on myself, but nothing ever really clicked. From years of therapy to then, if it's not therapy in the Western world, it's some sort of spirituality, right? To go in that way. And I did a lot of I followed Buddhism for a while, and then Kabbalah, which is the mystical form of Judaism. And I found that the meditation, the quiet going in meditation just did not work for me because of these pounding thoughts all the time. And I see that today with my own people, my own clients now, where, we're running, and we're doing this, we're doing that. And then the idea is to sit down and shut up and go into meditation. And how can that be? How is that possible? So when I encountered this work, it actually involves active movement and motion and strong breath work. And that's the intuitive part. But what we do in the learning is that the mind wants to know what's going on. But, just as we see in talk therapy, I remember driving to my therapist way back when, and I'd go, what am I gonna talk about today? And the fact of the matter is that we cannot heal with the mind. We actually have to drop in to our intuition, that deep inner knowing. And this is the work that I came across called emotional liberation in 2014. And I started doing it in the first year. It was so incredible to be able to learn what I was feeling and why I was feeling it, and going inward to stir it up so that it would percolate up and I could process it and release it. And it was something just so extraordinarily effective that I dropped what I was doing and said, I want to learn to help people this way. And of course, as a clinician, I was a health editor for a long while also. So I was in the realm of physical health, if you will, but this really truly is about mental health. And so I kind of, it was an easy transition from that clinical conventional medicine perspective to this more spiritual piece in learning our emotions. And the big deal, Roy, is that our emotions, the difficult emotions, are here for a reason. And that's like counterintuitive because all we want to do is get rid of our emotions, right? We want to, we drink them away or medicate them away, or we go shopping, or we have sex or pornography or whatever it is to take our mind off of feeling so bad. But the fact of the matter is that we need to go toward them rather than push them away. Now, it's kind of in vogue these days to go, yeah, you need to feel your emotions. Well, if I have never done that before, and in our culture, in our Western mind, we are illiterate around emotions and how we're feeling and why we're feeling it. It's just this cocktail of yucky feelings. And so when we can distill it in a very specific framework, step by step, and learn about ourselves and learn that we can go inward, then it is it's transformational, truly. And over the years that I've done this, I started working actually with cannabis as a amplifier of this work. Now, just a tool. So these plant medicines are just tools because there are lots of people who do the emotional liberation work without outside agents and get a lot out of it. But because I had been medicating, underground since I was in college, because somebody offered me, some cannabis, and I realized I felt better. I started medicating and medicated all through my young adulthood into middle age to, where I am today. And but the fact of the matter is, with that cannabis, where I was self-medicating, it would make me feel better during the time I was under the influence. But when the influence wasn't there anymore, when I became straight again, everything would the anxiety, the depression, everything would come back. So what I really learned from that ongoing, I guess, experimentation, you would say, self medication, is that you really need something to go in and grab that trauma by the roots and pull it out. And so that's what I discovered when I encountered this work around emotional liberation. And then when you added a little bit of cannabis, it amplified the emotion. And we know about cannabinoids, THC and CBD, the whole, but the stars of the show are today even CBD and THC. And we know research shows that CBD actually relaxes the fight or flight response. And so in doing this emotional liberation work, in stirring up the emotions to come up, our body is relaxed into it so that we can do it better. So I realized about 4 years ago that I started working and experimenting with psilocybin microdosing. And of course, it's experiential, and the people who come to me are saying, well, I hear you, I trust you, I hear the safety around this, and I know that you are going to support me and carry me through. And so we started microdosing, and we found that the responses within the framework of this emotional liberation method was even more potent and powerful. So it's that combination that I teach and offer and guide today in all my masterclass courses, in my retreats, and it makes a big difference in people's lives. And the way I describe it is that this is the end of the search. That if you have this, you don't have to go around and look under rocks, every rock, and try to find this system or that system, or this therapy or that therapy. So that's why I do what I do today, Roy.
Beautiful, beautiful. And this liberation therapy that you mentioned, is that something that kind of was created in the East, or who originally created this?
Excellent question. Yeah, so the developer and creator of it, and it came out. I came into it and learned it about a year after the book was out. And this is my Bible, and it's called Senses of the Soul, but it's emotional liberation, and it was written by my one of my mentors, and who I studied with for 4 years around this, GM Khalsa. And he's since moved to North Carolina, but he was living in LA. And he was a 40-year Kundalini master. But finding that people who were going into meditation would go up, 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 and they'd spend 2 hours in sadhana in the morning up here, and then they would come down, and then they would go out to their regular life, and they did not like their regular life because nothing changed. The toxicity was still out there. So he realized through deep work and deep meditation that our difficult emotions are the bridge to our soul. And so if we can go in and pull that thread through the emotions, we can be in touch with our intuition, again, that deep inner knowing, and our soul. So I joke with him and I say, I brought the drugs to the party. But when we first started working together about 7 years ago, he said, "Hey, Becca," he said, you can do the cannabis or the psilocybin microdosing. That's not mine. That's not within my purview. I don't do that." But I have to tell you, he has come around now, bless his heart. He has seen, and of course, I'm the clinician and always feeding him research and studies that have come up, and he's seeing delight around this. And in fact, we have a masterclass course coming up starting in April of 2024, where we're working together. So it's really, I have how wonderful that I'm able to work with the developer of this emotional liberation work, and bring my expertise around it, as well as that level of the plant medicine. Mm-hmm.
So with the plant medicine, there's different types. There's MDM, DMT, all these different things. Then there's people that are doing the ayahuasca and everything. So what one specifically are you using, and why? And have you played with a few of them?
So I am, what do I want to say? This is such a layered and textured subject. So I like psilocybin. Because it can be, I have sources where they grow it organic, and we actually infuse it with spirituality, singing to it, and it gets woo woo, but it's all about spirituality and how you
I'm
you
going to
see
just
that.
interject to that now, because the way you said, you sing to it, and it might sound woo-woo, and it might to some people, but I know that with plants, and I've seen it even in schools, that if you talk nasty words and beautiful words, the ones
Yes.
that is talked nasty will, and there was a Japanese guy that wrote a book as well, and he's actually showing all the crystals. But even in
Absolutely.
schools, the children have seen that. So that's 100% true. That by actually
Thank
having
you.
positivity into it.
Thank you for saying that. And I always, I always tag that on, Roy, because most of my clients who come to me are secular. They might not have done any. They might have been done therapy. I mean, that's probably the extent of it. So they're learning this whole piece around spirituality as it relates to the Kundalini, and the ancient practice, the ancient teachings that we bring in. And so I always, what do I want to say, qualify it and say it might sound a little woo-woo, because to a lot of people who are listening to us, it may sound woo-woo.
For sure.
What I like is the entheogens, which are the plant medicines. So, cannabis, I have wonderful resources and farmers who are growing it organic. To me, having come from the arena of holistic nutrition as a clinical nutritionist, I moved into that area. I believe how important and really invested in clean medicine. So having said that, most of the time, so let's say ayahuasca, what happens, or macro doses of psilocybin, what happens is that you just, if you go to a guide, what you'll do is lay down and you will have a mask over your head. They'll play wonderful music, and the plant will have its way with you for, anywhere from 4 to 8 hours. But that's not what we do in this work. And that's why microdosing is so important, because what happens is we are conditioning, strengthening, if you will, our nervous system so that we can bring these emotions up. Because remember, so many people all their lives have brought these emotions. When they start coming up, they poke through, and it's scary. So they're very close to the surface, and they need to learn how to ride that wave. That's what I do, is teach people to ride that wave. We invite the emotions up, and then it's like getting on a stallion and teaching it how you're going to ride this. And so when we include plant medicine, we include tiny amounts of it, because we want to stay in that space where we're in control. We are in control. So it's not letting the plant have its way with you. It's about bringing it into a framework where we are feeling into it and understanding what we're feeling and why we're feeling it. Now, having said that, yes, it is walking through the dark night of the soul. It is, and people who have done this will relate to this, that it is painful. It is suffering, but all you have to do is move this through layer by layer and wish it goodbye, and it won't, and it's gone, as opposed to feeling that yucky feeling each and every day for the rest of your life. So, as they say, to get on the other side, you have to go through it to get on the other side. But in doing it, it is the, what do I want to say? It is, you're so supported. I'm, as a teacher and a guide, it is about making people feel they are in a trustworthy environment. And so as a guide around this, it's very important for someone, we talk about set and setting, and that's what I spend a lot of time doing, is helping people feel safe in order to do this work. Because this work is not spiritual bypassing. This work is going in to that deep cream-filled center where the juice is, so that we can grab it and bring it out and let it go.
Are you typically doing one-on-one sessions, or do you do group?
I will do one-on-one. What I find is the power of groups is unparalleled, because we kind of walk around when we are in pain, in emotional pain, in suffering, and I know this. I'm like the only one around. I'm the only, it's me. I'm the only one, and everybody else has a better life than I do. But when we bring people together in a group, and I and I talk about, what the most recent practice or the most recent teaching that I've gone through and what came up for me. Others will go, yeah, I feel that same way. Yes. And it's just so bonding. It's so security binding. And I know that we talk about community, but it has to be among like-minded individuals. I'm here to move through my shit, and you're here to move through your shit. And so we're here all together. And that is so powerful. And it can't be, some of these gatherings, these online gatherings are like, I was just talking to somebody the other day, 400 people in this gathering of teachers, 400 people, I like a small group, no bigger than 12 people. That gives that allows the personal one-on-one attention, because that's what people need to feel safe, because they have not had that, mostly have not had that personal attention, that heart to heart intimate connection. And so it's very important. That is probably the most pivotal piece, that making people feel comfortable with me and with each other. So the bottom line is I like groups.
And because like I've come across where some, like say the facilitator kind of microdoses as well to get at the same level as the people in the room. Is that something that you do yourself, or do you just don't do it?
So if we're talking about, let's talk about cannabis for a moment. I will, for me, my charge is everybody in the room or everybody in the online course. And so I'm not, so I want to be singularly focused on what I'm doing. And so for cannabis, I will do some CBD to get in the field, but I do not do THC at the time. And I have very specific protocols with the THC and CBD, where people in their respective countries or states or whatever that might be, I ask them to make sure and I teach all of this, but to have CBD, THC 2 to 1, twice as much CBD as THC. So you can see the CBD, as I mentioned earlier, is relaxing the fight or flight response. So we have twice as much, and then we bring in the THC that peaks that emotion that comes up. I have people write me and go, I can't do THC because when I do it, I get really anxious. In fact, there was one most recently where she says, yeah, in a group of people and they're sharing it and I do it. And then all I want to do is leave the scene because I get so upset or I get sad and all I want to do is cry. And that's exactly what the plant is here to do, is to help you be in touch with your emotions, but in a recreational setting. Obviously, that's not the kind of thing that a person wants. But the plant knows the way. The plant, she knows what she's doing, and so people will come to me and say, "Well, I can't do cannabis because I get so anxious." Well, we need to change the relationship with the plant. We need to understand why this stuff is coming up. Now, having said that, the THC that's like in Colorado legally, where it's sky high, 27, 28, 30% THC. That's what I call crack THC. I mean, you do not want to go there. That is a prescription for some people, having a psychotic break. You do not want to do that. So I don't know where I was going with this. Oh, yes. So the microdosing. So the microdosing is important in the sense that microdosing is you're not consciously aware when you're at the levels, those very minuscule levels of taking in the psilocybin. So on a daily basis, you may feel lighter and brighter, but any kind of, dizziness or hallucination, things moving, whatever, no, it's too much. It's too much. So that's one of the other things that I help people do, is to find what we call their sweet spot. So, the microdosing can help a deeper connection with the world, a new appreciation of life. It does improve creativity and cognitive flexibility. Importantly, in my work, it improves emotional processing, and it heals through emotional release, and within, of course, that framework. So for me, I will microdose, because there is no I'm on track. We can, with microdosing, we can do everything we normally do: work, drive, interact, whatever that is, because it's not a macro dose of psilocybin. Did I explain that well
Absolutely.
enough?
Yeah,
Okay.
definitely. And
Okay.
like, especially in the States, because like I was looking at, a lot of these people when the cannabis became legal in more states, and then there was a lot of people, they were kind of creating their own business. Then it got very highly regulated. So all the kind of decent guys got shut out, and then big pharma's kind of kicking in. So I don't think it's safe, a lot of the stuff that's going out there, whereas people think because it's provided in mass quantities and they're even putting them in gummy bears, which to me is insane, that like, because children will pick that up, and when there's very high doses, it is so dangerous, that what they're doing. But when you see that, like you mentioned earlier, like you try to get everything as organic, and just making
Yes.
sure that,
Yes.
but unfortunately most people aren't even aware of the like toxicity in some of the products that are being sold.
Well, the crap that can be put in them. Now, if you don't know, if we're talking about the underground market, if you don't know your provider, then yeah, you're kind of hanging out there for anything, because what happens in illegal grows. Um, you don't, when you buy from a guy with, here's your money, here's your paper bag, right? And what, my paper bag, anything could be in that paper bag with the cannabis, right? Anything in that plant. So what happens is, if you're in a place where you have to look at the underground market, importantly, know your grower, know your legacy grower. Now, for like in Colorado, and I spent years in Colorado, and that's where actually I started cannabis elevation ceremonies. When it's legal, there are analyses and standards that a dispensary has to adhere to, and they have to prove that that particular batch of cannabis has been through all this testing, so and to show it's free of this, that, and the other thing. Now, do things slip through? Absolutely. I mean, if you have acres of plant and then you get some sort of bug or mold on them, and this, we're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars, it's like, shit, what am I going to do? And let's sneak some of this killer, this mite killer in, or this mold killer or whatever. And there's been busts in Colorado where dispensaries and cannabis companies have been fined big because they were found out that way. But generally speaking, if you buy from the legal market, you are going to have some certain confidence that it's going to be clean. Okay, despite what I've just said. But in the underground market, if you do not know your grower, then all sorts of shit can be put in that, and there's no there's no filtering or analyses or regulations on that. I believe, even though it can happen, that psilocybin, because it's fungi, that it's hard to add stuff to it. It's just, it's the mushrooms, it's the dried mushrooms. You grind it, and then you ingest it in various ways. Uh, there's always room for misdeeds and bad play in these sorts of things. But LSD is made in a lab. MDMA, I mean, the shit that they can put in that stuff and cut that. So I do like to stick with psilocybin, because I do believe it's the safest, for my people, safest way to go. Mm-hmm.
And even with the microdosing and people that actually go through this, because what I've seen, even with cannabis, I remember at a young age there was people that were kind of on it and they got addicted. They say it's not addictive, but I saw that they just like were in massive amounts, and I could see their speech was slowing down. They were just like, without a doubt, it had affected them.
Mm-hmm.
And with, like, say, people that are doing the ayahuasca, I've heard of some people, they go away to do the one ayahuasca, but there's others that get addicted to it and they're constantly doing it. With this, is it that you get to a certain level that you release the trauma, you're done, you know where you are, and you're grand, or is it something you have to continue for life?
You have such good questions. So can I say something about the THC? Because we know that it's not physiologically addictive; it's psychologically addictive. And this is what I love about cannabis, Roy, and that is that it serves us. It's sort of it's not called legal. It's not called formally an adaptogen. But what it does is it works for us in however we need it. So if we are in pain, if we are in emotional pain, and it serves us to just be stoned all the time. We call it, there's, it used to talk about sativa and indica was indicouch, because it makes you relaxed and, so in the couch all the time. So maybe somebody is in pain and wants to just be high all the time, and maybe to play video games or whatever. At some point in their life, they're likely going to say, I'm done with this. I want to move on from this. And so what happens is when they start tapering off of the cannabis, or they go cold turkey, that they are ready for something else. And so what she does, the plant, is sort of wraps them in a cocoon and holds them. But when a person is ready to come out, there's no, essentially, for the general population, there is no downside, that you just go out and continue with your life, the next step in your life. Whereas people who take SSRIs and other mood management drugs, terrible side effects, and it just so corrupts the brain chemistry that they can't get off them. I mean, fentanyl, you mentioned. I mean, look at, it was made to make people feel better, but in the end, so it is what I call a dependence on cannabis is the least of the worst of everything. When somebody comes out and people come to me and say, I'm ready to change my relationship with cannabis now, or there are those who say, I used to be really dependent and I had an addiction to cannabis and I'm very scared about it. It just turns it on its head in creating a new relationship with this plant. And that's one of the things I do. Now, in regard to the medicine, and becoming addicted to the feeling, right? So it's not macro journeys of acid or psilocybin or ayahuasca, whatever. I mean, there's ketamine is a big. I mean, ketamine is highly addictive, but it's like it's feeling better when a person is on it than not. And so what they want to do is just numb their lives and be in this this place where it feels so good. And that's getting lost. That's getting lost. And that's another form of spiritual bypassing.
With the breath work then, because I know I've experienced a lot of different types of breath work. I've seen kind of colorful visualizations, so kind of like tripping with just the breath work. But I've also been in big groups where a lot of people released the trauma. And thankfully, there was kind of good facilitators, so they were there to kind of help. Maybe they went too deep and maybe should have microdosed with the breath work as well, because maybe going very heavy is kind of the same. And that scares me as well, because
Yes.
sometimes online there's people doing this, and I'm thinking, what about somebody that's at home on their own and then they've just realized that they've been, abused as a child or something? That is serious.
Yes.
And,
Yes.
so we kind of have to have some sort of, I don't know. I'm not into regulation, but at the same time, there's so many crooks out there, even with doing facilitating. They just learn it and then they don't know what they're doing. They're just charging people. Go to this part of the Amazon. So, like, to protect people, what's the best way? Like, because a lot of people, they're hurting, and they've heard that
Right.
someone can help them. So how can they realize who to trust?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really important question. And I just want to, point out the breath work, but also there's a couple of books that have been written. Just looking at my library here and seeing if it's right here. I don't see it right away. But about silent meditation. So going to silent retreats, the Buddhist approach to silent meditation, that if that many people are triggered by silent meditation. And one example that comes up is for people who have been sexually abused as children, and their abuser took them and said, "Be quiet, be very quiet, otherwise, you know." And so they had, while this abuse of their body was going on, they had to be quiet, they had to be silent. So if you then what happens, somebody's in a silent meditation and silent, then this stuff percolates up and they're re-traumatized. So let me just say that whether it's anything can be triggering. So the big deal is preparing people for this this triggering, this re-triggering, and talking them through any expectations and what to do. What I always say, if stuff, you are in control, right? I mean, that's why when somebody is doing an ayahuasca trip, it's letting the plant have its way with you. I want you to be in control. In my work, you are in control. So when you have a little, you might be microdosing on psilocybin, or you might have a puff or two of some nice even 2-to-1 cannabis in your system. So I always tell people that you don't want, on cannabis, it's not about getting stoned. You do not want to get stoned, because you're going to lose the benefit of going in deep if that's the case, because you just numb yourself out. It's just sparking it more. It's just amplifying it a little more to go inward. So where was I going with that, Roy? Sometimes I get ahead of myself. I know. So I say to people that we're going to be doing this strong breath work, but if you feel things coming up too fast, too hard, I want you to drop into long, deep breathing and just be with it. Just be with the breathing. And it's an education before we go into any of this stuff. It is an education on how to take care of yourself. And that's what I teach, is a form of self-therapy. so people can do this themselves. It's always lovely to have a guide or a mentor or a coach or, whatever that looks like. And that's a role that I can and do serve. But in the end, I don't want you relying on me for the rest of your life. I want to help you get on the path where you are doing this regularly, so moving this stuff through. Now, that's why our masterclass program is it starts in April, and it spans a year. Now, it's not totally a year. We do 8 weeks on, and then you get a month to rest, and then 8 weeks on, and then another month to rest, and it goes for 5 modules like that. But it's really important to keep it up, because going to something for 3 days and then going, well, I've lived with this trauma all my life, and I'm going to go to this 4-day retreat and I'm going to get rid of all of it. I mean, it's, that's what the promise of ayahuasca, for instance, these ayahuasca retreats. But truly, I have talked and interviewed and did intake interviews with hundreds of people. And so many of them have tried psychedelics as yet another way to get rid of this feeling shitty, and it didn't work. It either didn't do anything, or they had they had a bad trip. We're not supposed to say bad trip, but there are such things as bad trips, and I don't think people have to have them. In my framework, people who want to do a full-on journey with psilocybin, I will, but only before they have had the opportunity to work with me and strengthen and condition their nervous system. Because you go in with this ayahuasca and people just go nuts. They go nuts. They don't know what to do with it. Their system does not know what to do with it. It's an assault on their nervous system. And we want to make it so there's no assault.
Oh, I love that. And just with the trauma, because I was even thinking just recently that with the childbirth, that must be traumatic for the baby. That the pain and what's going on, they don't know what's going on. So is that carried forward? But even going back a layer, like with genes, like from say the wars, the famines and everything, are we carrying trauma being passed on from cells? What's your thoughts on that?
My thoughts on that. So this establishes that there is it's a life, death, life, death, life, death cycle. And that's my belief system. That's what I believe. I believe that everything is energy, everything is vibration. And that is the metaverse. And that there is a huge sea of energy, and we come out of that sea of energy, and at the end we go back into that sea of energy, that ocean of energy. And then how do we come out? Maybe we come out here on this plane in the United States. It's all about the Americans in this world, or another world, or where are we? But the fact of the matter is that there's never any new energy, new additional energy. Energy is energy. It just reconstructs itself. So if we I do lean on the understanding that if we life is a continuum, and we're gonna and we're always moving toward wholeness, even if we don't know it. Though Donald Trump is moving toward wholeness. He may be several, not for me to judge, but just as an example, thousands and thousands of lives away from being kind and compassionate and being realized, if you will, or enlightened. And so it can be, we were just, my partner and I were just watching Groundhog Day the other day. Are you familiar with Bill Murray and Groundhog Day? Where he lives the same day over and over and over again until he actually realize his authenticity and how to interact with people in love and caring and that sort of thing. That can take a while depending on what sort of environment we came out of it. And so can we can grow, and if we haven't grown all that much, can we take that into the next life? Of course we take that into the next life. I mean, that's my belief, because our soul wants us to learn these lessons, and we are born into a situation that is going to encourage us and nurture us into healing what we've come into this world with. I mean, Stan Grof, you know, the psychiatrist who started out with working in the 60s with psychedelics, and then when they became illegal, he started holotropic breath work, which is a big thing these days. And then of course psychedelics coming back in, but you know, he has a chapter and verse on people who have gone back in and seen themselves in not only in utero, but also in the lives before that and what was going on. So truly, I believe in personal that there's trauma from intergenerational, because if I came from a very difficult and challenging and volatile childhood, and the only reason that happened was because my caregivers came from that, and their caregivers came from that. Remember, up until right now, children were supposed to be seen and not heard, and agriculture, which we were mostly agrarian for centuries. Farmers would have children, and lots of children, so they would be hands on the farm, and they were just these little pairs of hands to do work. And we're seeing that, of course, in sweatshops and whatever. But right now, right here, we are more conscious about how to raise children than we ever have before. We have a long way to go, but now so many of us honor children and honor their feelings. And so that's where we need this literacy to start, is for parents to say to their children, I see you're sad. Why are you sad? What's going on there? Or apologizing to my parents would have never apologized to me. Whatever I do to you, and screw you, kind of thing. So yes, and we do know women who are in distress and carrying a child. Let's say a woman who is going to have to give her baby up for adoption, for instance. And so she's carrying this child, and she's depressed and sad, and all of that energy is going into this baby. And so we see among adopted children, we see huge issues of abandonment, even though they might have been given up for adoption and then received by a set of parents who love them and adore them and are treating them in a very healthy way with great parenting. They still have this deep, deep issue around not being good enough that was instilled in that space when they were in utero. So yes, to your answer, yes.
And just finally, because like if we look at, say, big pharma psychologists that have kind of a patient for life, there's a lot of skepticism about what you're doing, not just you, but even with people that I'm working with as well, helping people, because they've been kind of, I suppose, the propaganda, the brainwashing, this is the only way, take the tablet, take all these medications. And they think, when you come across that, like, how is there ways of kind of trying to peel the layers off that they're open to alternatives?
That's a great question. Because I see this as a clinician also. We have a society, Western society, and of course the Western mind is not just in the United States, but it's in Europe and elsewhere, but it's take a pill and feel better, right? Take a pill and feel better. And that has gotten us into big trouble over the years. And we're, we're seeing this in the psychedelic community, right? Ayahuasca, go wherever and take this plant medicine pill and feel better. And it's like, I just want to be done with this misery. We can't do it that way. And so what generally happens is that people get worn out. They get worn out by pharmaceuticals. They see that it's not, the big deal, the big complaint for people who I work with is who have been on medications for decades in some cases. It started, I had a client who was put on SSRIs as an 11-year-old. And so the tapering, he got very interested in tapering, and even his psychiatrist did not know how to taper. So you have these doctors who are pushed by the pharmaceutical companies to write these scripts and give this stuff out, but when it's time to come off, they have not a clue as to how to come off of it. So generally what happens is people need to go through a self-realization that a lot of times what the wake-up call for people is that, I'm taking this anti-anxiety drug and I don't feel anxious, but I also don't have any pleasure in my life. So, while the anxiety has been quelled, also all the pleasurable emotions have been quelled. And they get very tired of this tiny spectrum of emotions because they can't feel the good things that they want to feel. And so that is, that seeks them, that leads them to seek out other ways of being. And that's what I get a lot in my space.
I know I said that was the last question, but if with the nutrition, because your experience with the nutrition, and I see so many people with digestive issues, and I know that some of the stuff is the toxins they're spraying with it, but I believe a lot of it is the trauma that's coming out, and that's why it goes down to the stomach. And I just like, if you'd like to just touch a bit on that.
Yeah, this is where we bring in, it gives me goosebumps to talk about this, Roy, where the spirituality, the yogic science of the chakras, and in our abs, and if I stand up, in our abs, right here, is the third chakra point, and that's where we hold a lot of our trauma. I mean, our trauma is embedded in our tissues and our nervous system, but we hold a lot of it there. And so, of course, you would see people with stomach issues, and we know that the physical ailments and challenges often, most come from emotional trauma. And so if I am constantly pushing down my feelings, where does it go? Where do those feelings go? They have to go somewhere, and they go into maladies. They go into, digestive upset, cancer, whatever it looks like. So that is why I went into this space, because I was I'm a nutritionist and have been since 1996, but I found that no matter how many supplements, and functional medicine is really about at the cellular level, like getting to the source. But at the cellular level, with that emotional suffering, that cell, all the trillions of cells in our body can be affected by that constant onslaught of stress. This is not a news flash these days, but what happens we can be taking all the supplements and eating all the best food in the world, but if we can't deal with that trauma, it's going to show up physically. Yeah.
Excellent. Listen, Becca, thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. It's fascinating. So you might let people know where they can get in contact with you.
Wow, thank you. It's easy. It's so easy. It's just myname.org. So it's
people would put
Becca.
down myname.org.
No. Sorry. Thank you for that. It's beccawilliams.org. And everything you ever need is to know about what's coming up from me. And what I have to offer is right there, beccawilliams.org. Yeah, I have all the social media and stuff, but beccawilliams.org.
Perfect. I'll make sure. I'll put the links both on the audio and the video. And I put the social media as well, because everybody kind of follows what they like. So it all helps. So
Roy, thank you.
Thank you very much. So
that's all
for me as well. That's all for the meditation podcast. You'll find all our episodes on meditationpodcast.org. Until next week, take care. Well, I hope you enjoyed this week's episode. Be sure to give us a thumbs up, 5-star rating, and share with your friends. And you'll find all my shows with the QR code or bio.link/podcaster, as well as my podcast coaching. And I'd like to thank my sponsor, DanielPacker.com, helping people with anxiety, stress, and addictions. He's got a 90% success rate, and you only pay if you're successful. Also, if you'd like to go on a podcasting tour, I can help you do that. And if you're interested in sponsorship, you can contact me on my bio.link/podcaster. Until next week, take care.